Good morning.
Hi, friends.
Hello, hello. So glad to see you all. Especially those of you who skipped the forum because you knew you were or you were just done with Isaiah.
Us slackers who didn't read Isaiah.
There was a little of that. That's okay.
To go to the forum. Trust me.
It was recorded.
That's true.
It was a good forum.
Thank you. I'm going to just admit all, Nancy. Trying to. Because they're just all showing up. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Oh, wow.
We're going to be on several screens today, I think. Oh, dear people, good to see your beloved faces. Thank you so much for being here.
How's everybody? Good.
Oh, so, friends we haven't seen for a while. Oh, goodness. How fun.
Yeah.
Always makes me so happy. The hard part is saying goodbye at the end of these meetings because I don't want to let you guys go. It's always the hardest part.
Yeah. I have another meeting at 1.
Well,
So, but
okay.
I'll see
Well, I
most
think
of
we
it,
want to do our best to honor Dr. Gwathney's time too.
Of course.
And so we might go over a teeny bit, but we want to get started here soon and
that's
wrap
good,
up
yeah.
as soon as we can.
He is in our EFM class, so it's just wonderful to have him and his wife. So.
Well, I see Dr. Gwathney here, and I believe Dr. Gwathney's parents might be here too.
Yes, they are.
Welcome back to St. Peter's. Good to see you, Mr. and Mrs. Gwathney. Used to seeing you in the South Transept. That's where I'm imagining you right now. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Nancy, and Alan, I'm gonna let you take over inviting people in because I want to get us praying and then start this conversation. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Oh, let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this beautiful day, for this chance to be together across distance, to be together through the power of your Holy Spirit. We give you thanks for our intellect, our inquisitiveness, for the gift of science, the gift of curiosity that leads us to learn more and more about this world you've created and our place in it. And we give you thanks for the ways that Dr. Jamal Gwathney has lived into that curiosity and his many gifts, including that of his brilliant mind and his compassion and his willingness to share. And we thank you for having him here today. Amen.
Amen.
And we thank you for the good news that he's going to share with us. So, Dr. G. Oh, wait, Nancy?
You need to make Alan and I co-hosts so we can manage.
You can actually do the things I asked you to do?
Yeah.
So sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, hang on. Yes, I do want to make Nancy a co-host. Yes, I mean it. I really mean it. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, dear ones. We'll let these 12 people in the waiting room hop in. And I want to ask everyone to remember to use the, actually, I think what we decided would be simplest would be to use chat for questions.
Right.
I will do my best to offer those once Dr. Gwathney has made his presentation. So we'll try to answer those in the order in which they are received. And thank you all for muting if you're not the one speaking. Even the sound of your heater going on in the background can actually interfere with us being able to hear the speakers. So if you could mute yourself if you're not the speaker. Dr. Gwathney, cannot thank you enough for being with us today, for sharing your experience and the hope that you bring us. I don't want to take up any more time by saying all the amazing things I could about you, because there are many, but Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. It is really great to see a lot of familiar faces again, and actually unmasked faces are really, really great to see. And I just want to, introduce myself again, Jamal Gwathney. I'm a family medicine physician by training for over 20 years now, and active duty in the United States Public Health Service for the last 15 years now. I really just want to quick, maybe 2 minutes about the Public Health Service, because not too many people know about us. And we are the only uniform service in the world dedicated to public health. We're small, but feisty. We have about 6,100 of us in the country right now, all over the country, all over the world. Doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, veterinarians, scientists, anything you having to do with public health, that's what we do. Obviously, we're very busy right now. Two maybe notable figures that folks may remember: C. Everett Koop, United States Surgeon General, Commissioned Corps Officer. And most people don't know Dr. Anthony Fauci is a retired 2-star Rear Admiral in the United States Public Health Service. Spent 27 years as a PHS officer over at NIH. So we've been doing a lot of work since 1798. I'm here today because I think part of my job as a commissioned officer is to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of the nation. That's our mission. And so that's what I think the vaccine actually is going to play a critical role in getting us to the other side of this pandemic. Because I think a lot of us are just really quarantine tired and, tired of doing the masking and doing the separation and the isolations. And we need something to help us get to that other side. Because we're just tired and we need that help. So I think the vaccine is going to be critical. I'm going to talk today about kind of the process of how we got to the vaccine. Then is it safe and is it effective? And then hopefully we have a lot of questions. I love questions. I really do. So kind of how we got to this point with the vaccine and this, you heard EUA, emergency use authorization versus approval, and words matters. And, most of us, know if we work in the government, every specific word matters in a regulation and a statute or anything. So I'm going to kind of tell the difference between what an approval is and what an emergency use authorization happens to be, so we know kind of what we're dealing with. So when FDA approves a medication, a vaccine, basically they determine that there is substantial evidence consisting of adequate and well-controlled investigations that the drug will have the effect that is intended to have. Also, the benefits of the drug outweigh any of its risks when it's used according to the product's label. So substantial evidence and clear risks, benefits outweighing the risks. So emergency use authorization, the FDA determines that there's reason to believe that the product may be effective. So a less standard, definitely. And then weighing the risks and the benefits of the product based on the data available at the current time. So those are kind of the two, bars that we're having to meet. So yes, the EUA is a lower bar, but it's only utilized when we're in emergency situations. So basically the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, or the Secretary of Homeland Security has to declare an emergency, then we're able to use these emergency use authorizations. So that's where we're at right now. So the group that just met on Thursday, the 10th, with the FDA, basically had to vote on the Pfizer vaccine. So they were just voting just on the Pfizer vaccine. They'll vote next Thursday on the Moderna vaccine. And what they had to vote on was based on the totality of scientific evidence. This is the exact wording: based on the totality of scientific evidence available, do the benefits of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine outweigh its risks for use in individuals 16 years of age and older? So that was the exact wording. That's what they voted on. And they had a lot of discussion about that. There were 17 yeses, 14 noes, and 1 abstention out of the 22 members. So, and we can get into, voting and whatnot. So that's how we got here. The vaccine trials started July 27th. And did they go quickly? Yes. Are we in the middle of a pandemic and people hospitalized and people dying? Yes. So things needed to go a little faster. I'm gonna go on to is the vaccine safe? And I'm mainly talking about the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. There are numerous other vaccines that are coming down the pike, but these two will be the first that we're talking about. So is it safe? I think it's important to talk about what the vaccine is not. The vaccine is not a live virus. So there's no way that you can actually get coronavirus from the vaccine. This RNA process, mRNA process, basically uses our own cells to make one protein. The actual virus, coronavirus, is made up of 29 proteins. So one protein will be made in our bodies. Our bodies then react to that protein, make an antibody, and we get immunity from that. So there's no way to get coronavirus from one of the 29 different proteins that are required to get coronavirus. What it is, so there are side effects. People will have side effects from the vaccine, and we put that up there out front so that when people do have them, you're expecting them. They usually only last 24 hours, maybe 48 at the most. The big four, the side effects that happen: headache, muscle aches, joint aches, and pretty bad fatigue. Basically, people feeling really, really tired. Now, again, those usually happen and they happen within 24 hours, maybe within 12 hours. They start, they're gone by 24 hours. It actually happens less, the side effects happen less the older you get, which is kind of counterintuitive, but your immune system reacts less the older you get. So the younger folks actually get more of the reactions than the older folks. Then you also could say, does the vaccine then work as well? But they've done the studies and it does work as well. You still get immunity and you still get antibody levels. And so, but you get less severe reactions from the actual vaccine. Is it safe? What we don't know, again, what we don't know, since the study is so short period of time right now, we don't know long-term effects. We don't know that yet. We don't know how long the antibodies will last when you get the actual vaccine. We don't know that yet. People are in the studies right now, and that's why we're getting that information. And so it's important to give it some time to actually get there. But what we do know is that it's safe, is that there were no serious adverse reactions in both the studies. And I'm talking about 2 studies, so that's about 70,000, 73,000 people. And just to put it into context, a normal vaccine study will have 3,000 to 5,000 people. Does it take a lot longer? Yes, but it's only 3,000 to 5,000 people. So having 73,000 people in a study is a ton of data and a ton of information to be able to hang your hat on to say, this actually is safe and it actually works. Again, we don't know about those long-term effects. So we'll be upfront and clear about that. So is it effective? So basically, you've seen the 94% effective, 95% effective, and how they came to those numbers. Basically, they took the 2 groups, say the Moderna group, well, let's say Pfizer. Pfizer had 43,000, about 43,000 folks that actually received 2 doses. And they were split up pretty evenly between those who got saline, the placebo, and those who got the vaccine. And they looked at how many cases of coronavirus happened in those, in the whole study. And so there were about 170 actual people that got coronavirus, and 162 of them were in the placebo group. versus 8 were in the actual vaccine arm. So then that's how you get your 94.1% effectiveness for that. Now, if you look really deep dive into the numbers, and people will say, well, the numbers are true, but sometimes the numbers can be a little misleading and you need context. Like if you look at it in, it'll say, oh, for the Pfizer, oh, it's a 100% effective for Asian Pacific Islanders. And it's 100% effective for African Americans. And it's 100% effective for people over 75. And then when you really look at the numbers, the difference is, oh, one person over 75 got the vaccine and 0 people, you know, on the other side. So 1 versus 0, 100%. And it's that same 1 versus 0 in many of those groups. So yes, it's 100%. Statistically, that's the correct number, but you have to take it into context. So looking at all of the data, it is still effective. It is still safe. You know, things that we don't know about the younger children, 16, you know, and younger, 17 and younger. We haven't studied those folks as much as yet. We don't know about pregnant women. And we want to definitely know about pregnant women because we do know when women are pregnant and they get coronavirus, they definitely have more complications and have to be hospitalized. So we actually want women to be vaccinated. I would probably say the current recommendation right now is that if you're pregnant, you probably should not get the vaccine just yet until we get some more data. If you're anticipating wanting to be pregnant, I say definitely get the vaccine first, and then wait at least 30 to 90 days to start trying to get pregnant afterwards, would be the recommendation. But we do want people to get vaccinated as much as possible. I think I'm going to stop there, make it short, make it brief, and now answer questions.
And we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Indeed. So starting at the top. Joan Ho asked, she had 2 questions actually. Can you explain the rationale behind the 14 days quarantine and its benefits? And also another question, for those who are super spreaders, but don't show symptoms, what can be done about this group to identify and avoid contracting the virus inadvertently?
Okay, so 14-day quarantine is based on the incubation period of the vaccine, of the coronavirus itself. So it takes between 10 to 14 days for you to actually start showing symptoms, up to 14 days. And I'd probably say 93% of people will actually convert to positive within 7 to 10 days after exposure. So the 14 days when you get exposed is your incubation period that allows you to, you know, after 14 days, if you're testing negative and you're not having symptoms, then you're probably truly negative from that exposure 14 days ago. So it all has to do with the incubation period of the virus. And all the viruses have different incubation periods. As far as the super spreaders, and what's the thing, what you have to do to protect yourself against the super spreaders? Keep your distance, wear your masks, and potentially get vaccinated. But we have to keep hounding these public health interventions over and over and over again, because unfortunately, people aren't doing them as much as we could. We'll say that. So these super spreaders, and they're asymptomatic, we don't know. We have to keep our distance. Number one, to be keeping a distance. And we have learned 6 feet is probably not enough. We have to do it a little more than 6 feet. Coughs and sneezes can go 20 feet. We have, you know, better information, better data. I would say, and then wearing your mask and, you know, keeping your distance are the 2 best things for that.
Thank you so much. Question from Hank George, was the reason for such a fast process the RNA code that may have been available for previous epidemics? Will the increasing knowledge of genetics improve future developments in vaccines?
So yes, I definitely think genetics will definitely improve future vaccines, and they'll be able to be produced a lot faster. I don't think the code was available beforehand. No, it was actually done very quickly from this particular coronavirus, which is different from, say, MERS, which is also a coronavirus, and the first SARS. And so they actually they got the genome and the code very quickly and put it out. And within 60 something days, a little over 60 days, they actually had the code and put it out to everyone. And people started working on, this particular vaccines and treatments and things along those lines. Oh, you're muted.
Ah, yep. That's going to be the quote of the year, right? You can embroider it on a pillow.
You're muted.
So a question about blood types. Are people with type O blood less likely to get COVID, from Carolyn Linderman?
That's what some anecdotal, there's been no research on it, but just people have seen, if you're type O positive, they've been less likely to be infected. We don't have a particular rationale for that, a medical basis for that just yet. But that's what it seems like right now, that, I think type A is more at risk for being infected, and type O positive, a little less.
And we're having fun with genetics. So since there are 29 different COVID-19 proteins, is there a potential for 29 different vaccines?
Ah, that's a very interesting question. So yes, so you could have vaccines that target different parts of the protein. You want your vaccine to target, or to be able to neutralize the actual virus as much as possible. That's why we call them neutralizing antibodies. And so not all of the actual proteins are readily available on the virus. And so the spike protein, that's what this particular mRNA codes for, the spike protein, so right on top. And there are mutations out there, but the mutations actually don't cause as many problems as we would think. I think there are, as of right now, maybe 90,000 different cataloged strains, 12,000 different mutations already. And the 12,000 mutations don't generally affect how much they're infected, how much you're infected, or how bad the disease is. And most of the time, which is like normal life, a mutation makes the virus less infective, works less well. Like it's like your grades in school, it's easy for them to go down, very hard for them to improve, or your weight, easy to go up, hard to go down. And so most of these mutations actually make the virus less virulent. And so that's why they chose this spike protein, because it's common towards amongst all of them.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that question, Renee. Here's one I know all of us are asking, from Judy Michaels. How will we find out when our group is eligible?
So that will all come for us here in the county, from San Diego County, putting out the vaccine. And then right now, I think the current process, Wednesday or so, is what I've read, that we'll get about 20,275 doses for that 1A group, which is the healthcare workers and the long-term care residents. And that 28,000 is not even going to cover the 39,000 healthcare workers that we have in San Diego County. So it's going to be a little while. So if you're, say you're 70 and you're relatively healthy, you'll be in that not 1A, not 1B, but 1C level if you're greater than 65. And it may be a month, 2 months before your group actually is eligible. And we would predict the normal vaccine outlets, whether you're getting them from your regular doctor, whether you're getting them at CVS, Rite Aid, whether you're getting them at the VA, if you normally go there, those are going to be the general places that they go. And then the county will, inform all of us, okay, healthcare workers are done. Now let's go to essential workers, which are the 1B. So the county will let us know.
Thank you. And here's a question. This is nice to kind of have in mind as we think about other vaccines we're familiar with. Bill Riggle is wondering, how long does the current flu vaccine last?
Interesting. Yeah, it lasts about 6 months.
Okay.
The current flu vaccine will last about 6 months. And that's why we try and tell folks maybe to get your flu shot maybe end of October. Then you have November, December, January, February, March, and April. Flu season generally ends in April. The highest times for flu actually are February and December. So you want to be really covered during those months. 6 months. And again, back to coronavirus, they do know the interim studies that the actual vaccine has had antibody levels, sustained antibody levels at 3 months for the folks that have been in the study for at least 3 months after that second shot. So they know that so far. So, and I'll add this, and the actual level of antibodies from the vaccine were just as good, or if not greater, than what we would call convalescent plasma. That means people who got coronavirus, the disease, and then they have antibodies in their plasma. So the actual vaccine gave you either equivalent antibodies or higher antibodies than getting the disease, which is a good thing.
So even people then, you could extrapolate two things. One, we shouldn't be discouraged if this vaccine only lasts 6 months. We're used to a regular flu vaccine that lasts only 6 months. That's kind of not unusual. But also, if we've had COVID-19, we probably still want to get vaccinated because we could actually get better immunity from the vaccine, from what you're saying.
That is correct. That is the current thought process, that even if you've had coronavirus, you should get the vaccine. We don't know, we haven't done a lot of research on giving a vaccine to people who have had coronavirus. There are a few in the Pfizer study, but not a lot. But that is the current thought process right now, because we do know those antibodies, if you've gotten coronavirus, do go down after about 90 days.
Okay, thank you so much. So in thinking about whether pregnant mothers should take the vaccine, a loving mom and grandma, Nancy McMahon, wants to know, what about lactating mothers?
Again, I would probably right now not recommend lactating moms get a vaccine just yet either, until we get some more data. And I didn't mention it, but when we're studying, new drugs, new vaccines, we try them out. We investigate them on adults first, make sure it's safe and make sure it works, and then we transition to children and pregnant moms, and that's a safe way to go. What does happen, and what's happened in the Pfizer study, when you're vaccinating women of childbearing age, some of them will get pregnant. And so there were actually 23 women in the Pfizer study that got pregnant while getting the vaccine, and they only had information on 2. All of them were pregnant still. 2 had miscarriages for unknown reasons, which is not anything above the normal miscarriage rate in the general population. But so they will be tracking them very closely, the ones that actually got the vaccine, and they're doing actual additional studies right now on children and women right now. So we'll get some data in the coming months on pregnant moms and children.
Thank you so much. For those of you, we're still having friends join us, welcome. If you missed the first several minutes, this is being recorded. And so we will have a link to the recording if you want to catch the first half hour. So we'll get that out in our St. Peter's communications and post that when we are done. So Melissa's asking a question that's dear to my heart as someone who has an EpiPen. And I've wondered about allergies, immune response, and COVID anyway. There's talk about people with allergies who use EpiPens having complications from the vaccine. Can you speak to this?
So yes, so the committee that met on Thursday did discuss this and was recommending some additional research for folks who have, severe allergies. It's interesting, 2 people, I don't know if it was 2 or maybe now it's up to 4 folks in the UK, the healthcare workers that had these reactions. And is it a reaction to the coating, what we call the lipid nanoparticle versus the actual mRNA that codes where we don't know that difference yet. So when the CDC creates what's called a VIS, the vaccine information sheet. Every vaccine has a vaccine information sheet. They will let us know whether they think we need to hold off if you have a severe allergic reaction, or just be able to monitor folks who if you have a reaction, if you've had a reaction in the past, okay, maybe you get the vaccine and you need to be monitored in the clinic or wherever it is that you're receiving the vaccine, and then move on, because all the reactions happen really quickly. So you're not going to go home and start having a reaction. So that's right now, that remains to be seen, but I don't think it's as big an issue as we would think it would be. Hopefully not.
Thank you. If you're tracking the chat, this one was sent to me directly, so you won't see it, but there's a question. Were the two studies tested equally to include African Americans?
So yes, the African Americans, so there are about 9%, a little more than 9% African Americans in the Pfizer study, and maybe about the same in the Moderna study. And kind of to put that again in context, African Americans generally in research studies have very low participation, and by very good reason. Usually it's about maybe 5% in a study, where African Americans comprise about 13% of the US population. So 9% in the study is right there in the middle. It's not bad, not great, it's not bad, but certainly it may not accurately reflect the disease burden in the African American community, because we know it is definitely a lot higher in the African American community compared to other ethnicities. And so we do know, that's why, we do know that it's still relatable, generalizable is what we say, to different groups, but they were represented, and they were represented early on in the study. One of the questions in the actual committee was, there was a thought that the Asian Pacific Islanders, African Americans, Latinx were recruited later on in the study, so we don't have that data yet, but they were actually recruited early. And then at the end, they said, we want more. And so they went out and actively recruited more minority participants. So I think they were adequately represented, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. And when you say with good reason for a lower participation previously, may I assume that that's good reason because the African American communities had good reason not to trust being in studies because of our shameful history? That's the good reason? Okay.
Certainly, yes. There was Tuskegee. There was, more recently, I was in Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis. And so, yes, there's definitely a good reason. And I read an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that talked about trustworthiness versus trust. And it would be insane to just say, oh, all of this stuff has happened, and now we have this new vaccine or this new medication, and we just expect everyone to trust us.
Right.
No, it doesn't work that way. We're just not going to give out your trust. You need to do something to let us know that you're trustworthy. Yeah. Make the process transparent. Give us the information we need. Make sure the medication or vaccines get to the populations that they need to get to. You have to show us and earn our trust and be trustworthy versus just giving you trust carte blanche. And I think this process is slowly meeting those standards and is going to be hopefully widely accepted with talks like this moving forward.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being part of getting the word out. So a question from Renee: once someone is infected with the virus, how long are they contagious?
So the CDC standards say you're infectious for about 10 days afterwards, from the time either you start having symptoms, or if you're not having symptoms and you just have a positive test, from the time of your test, 10 days. And there's a difference between isolation and quarantine, and that's why the days are different. And words matter. So when you're just exposed to something, then you go into quarantine. When you actually have symptoms or you have an actual positive test, then you go into isolation. And usually at about 7 days, you're usually not infected. So they give an extra 3 days. And so that's why you go into isolation for 10 days, totally separate from everyone. And then you should be clear.
Right. Thank you. More allergy questions. Is there any problem for someone who is allergic to shellfish?
Not that we know of. I can't say yes, I can't say no, but not that we know of at this time. There's no data that goes either way for any particular allergy, unfortunately.
The question about going back to the original allergy anaphylaxis question, you mentioned that there wasn't certainty of whether or not it was the coating or not, which made me ask a question. We've been hearing a lot about how Pfizer's vaccine needs to be very, very cold. And in fact, my husband, Dan, is working with a company trying to make a heavy lift drone that can carry a gigantic freezer to get it into rural communities, which is kind of fun. We're all doing our part, right? Does the Moderna have the same requirement since it's also an mRNA based vaccine?
That's a great question. And so I think that is part of that proprietary difference. So the mRNA is basically the same. How they packaged it is different for the Moderna. And so no, the Moderna actually can last 30 days in a refrigerator versus the 5 days for a Pfizer vaccine. So definitely going to be a lot less burdensome on the logistics of getting it out to places. And then some of the other vaccines, by Johnson & Johnson or Janssen and AstraZeneca, some of those, can actually just be refrigerated and don't need to be frozen, but they're different. They're not mRNA, those are adenoviruses. And I believe one of them is just a single shot versus 2 shots. So no, they're not the same. And that coding is different. And that's what makes them different in how you can ship them and all that good stuff. Wonderful.
Thank you for that. Michelle has a question. If I show no symptoms after exposure to COVID-19 7 days ago, should I be tested? If someone in an assisted living has COVID, should they receive the vaccination?
So was that 2 questions?
2 questions. I think that was 2 questions. So okay. I was exposed 7 days ago. Should I be tested even though I don't have symptoms? Okay. And we'll start with that one.
Yes.
We'll come back to the other one.
So the answer is yes. So the normal process that we follow is, once you've been exposed, you should actually get tested probably at 7 days and at day 14. That's kind of the we'll say strict recommendations. Just recently, CDC came out and kind of loosened those quarantine guidelines. Unfortunately, people weren't quarantining at all, still going to work. Because people have to work, people have to, provide food on the table, pay their bills. And so to maybe make it a little easier for people to actually adhere to the quarantine standards, they changed it from quarantining, not isolation, but quarantining 14 days. They changed it down to 10 days of quarantine if you got a test. I'm sorry, without a test. 7 days of quarantine if you got a test. Okay. So you've been exposed. If you get a test at day 7 and you're not having symptoms and you're negative, then yes, you'd be clear from quarantine at that point. If you didn't get a test, you'd have to wait 10 days and then you're good.
Thank you.
And the other part of that question was?
So if someone in an assisted living facility has COVID, should they receive the vaccination?
So yes, they would be in that 1A category right now. And they've been in long-term or assisted living. Actually, assisted living might be in the second category. And so they should, yes, they definitely are living in a congregate setting and would be eligible definitely based on their age, usually over 65. And so, yes, they should get vaccinated.
Okay, thank you. So if an individual has an autoimmune disorder, such as Hashimoto's or Addison's, do the vaccine present additional risks?
Mm-hmm. So we have not seen any additional complications with any medications or with any conditions as of right now. Maybe potentially and the anaphylaxis, or allergic reactions, but we have not seen any in 73,000 people. And I want to keep going back to that because that's a lot of data. Again, usually 3,000, 5,000 people in a study. So having between the two studies, 73,000 people, participants, is a lot of data to say, you know, you'd find something that was an adverse reaction or interacted. They had people who had diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, things along those lines, chronic conditions. And so we didn't find anything just yet. Certainly, once millions of people are getting vaccinated, we'll get some more information.
Okay, and that does lead into the next question. Can you speak to how well represented people were with additional health conditions? Do you have the numbers on that?
I do. Here, let me see. So I know in the Pfizer study, about 46% of the participants had an actual high-risk condition, what the CDC called a high-risk condition. So heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, high blood pressure. So about 46% in that Pfizer study. And I believe it was about the same for the Moderna study. So I believe they were well represented.
Thank you. Here's a question for us trying to live with this day to day. What are the most effective masks that the general population could use? For example, many are using homemade cloth masks with 1 or 2 layers of cloth compared to the blue color surgical masks that are used by nurses and hospital staff, or the N95s. How should we select and be sure it works to protect ourselves in public places, such as the supermarket or pharmacy visits? What do you suggest as guidelines while we wait for our vaccine?
Okay. So I would say if you can get your hands on a surgical mask, that would be the second level. And if you can get those, I would recommend those. N95s, certainly obviously the top of the line. You should actually be fit tested for those and go through a whole process to make sure you have a proper seal, make sure it fits your face properly. So that poses some problems, some logistical problems, or whether you're getting the right one, whether it actually fits your face properly, things along those lines. But obviously the N95 is the top of the line. So I would say the facial coverings, the cloth ones, they work. Not the gaiters. The gaiters are the full that we're recommending against the gaiters. So I would say if you can get a surgical mask, that would be my top choice. The facial coverings, the cloths will work, but combining that with the distance is the main thing. Keeping your distance. So you have to go to the grocery store. You have to go pick up medications. You're in and out. Limit your exposure. Less than 15 minutes would be great. You get your stuff, you leave.
Okay, so it's belt and suspenders.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think we've heard a version of this. If someone has had COVID and recovered, do they need the vaccine? You've said yes, but will they be given a lower priority?
Not as of yet, no. No, there was no discussion of that. Basically, wherever you fit into the normal scheme, if you were 40 years old with diabetes, then you would meet one of those chronic care conditions and you'd be in that 1C group, age group. And so no, there right now there isn't any delineation if you've had the disease or not.
There are a lot of us with allergies, I can tell, because this has come up again. Will they be looking into, Pfizer or Moderna be looking into the effect with significant allergies specifically? Are they waiting for it to just come up in the process of the studies?
No, I think they actually are. That came up in the meeting on December the 10th, that they will actually be looking at that specifically in future studies. And there are going to be several future studies on healthcare workers, because those are the ones that are going to be getting it first, in the military and in the VA. And so specifically looking at those things, I failed to mention in the Pfizer study, there were, so actually, they actually did look at who was having allergic reactions in the Pfizer study. And in the vaccine group, they had 137 people have an allergic reaction versus in the placebo group, 111 people. I don't know how they're having allergic reactions to saline, but well, Moderna used saline. I don't know what Pfizer used as their placebo, but they had 111 allergic reactions in the placebo group. So obviously it was 0.51% in the placebo group and 0.63%. So not statistically significant. So there were reactions, but they weren't any different from the placebo versus the vaccine group.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Thanks for that question, Pat. Renee has a question about intergenerational households. When you live in an intergenerational household, how does that impact the prioritization of household members for the vaccine?
That's an excellent question. They have not factored that into the actual prioritization as of yet. Certainly, you know, if you have an older person or a person with chronic disease, they would get their vaccine first, and we want to protect them first. So if a younger person were to go out and get coronavirus and brought it home, then that older person at risk would be protected because they got the vaccine first. So that's the kind of the mindset around why we prioritize, how they did, but they did not factor that in. Interesting question.
Joan Ho has another question. How many % of Asians participated in the vaccine studies, and what are the data?
I would say so. Asian Pacific Islanders were at approximately, let me see here. Let's pull this up here. You know what? They were included in other, unfortunately, and it was about 8.2% of other, which so does not, you know, specifically parse out Asians. And the data is, I would probably say, pretty sparse for a lot of those groups, for Native Americans, for children 16 to 17, for Asians, it's pretty sparse right now.
Thank you. I got another private chat message from someone whose name comes across as a Zoom link. So I don't know who you are. Paul, oh, wait, I do. You're Dave Clemens. Hi, Dave. Dave says, thank you. And do you have any background about the 4 no votes and the 1 abstention at Thursday's meeting?
I was hoping someone asked that question.
Thank you, Dave.
Because I did watch that 8 hours and 41 minutes of actual meeting time, and I went to the end to specifically figure out who voted no, and then listened to see what they were talking about, because it wasn't like a Supreme Court decision when if you have, you know, no votes or dissents, and then they write their dissent of why they said no. They didn't do that for this. So the main reasons why folks were saying no were mainly when I read what they actually voted on, you know, the totality of information. Is it going to be effective for people 16 and greater? And so a lot of folks had issues with the 16 to 17-year-olds, and there wasn't a lot of data for those. And so they were voting no not because they didn't think the vaccine was safe, but they didn't think it was safe in the 16 to 17-year-olds. They didn't have enough data. That, or the lipid nanoparticles and not having enough information on the risk of that and allergic reactions. Those are the main reasons why people were voting no. There were the 4 no's and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Is curious to parse those things out. So I'm glad you took the time to do the detective work for us. Here's a question from Susie. Should we just get the first vaccine that's available, or how is the release going to be handled from one vaccine to another? We heard that we just bought 100 million doses of the Moderna vaccine last week.
Okay.
You know, if we have to choose between Pfizer or Moderna or what have you.
Right. I would say so. Whatever's first available would probably work. So between the two, you know, there's no major difference between the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine that we know of at this point. I was listening to Dr. Fauci. He was, you know, saying the same thing. You know, it doesn't really matter. He would get either one. And so whichever is first available at, you know, your doctor's office or wherever you can go to get the vaccine, I would say between these two, it doesn't really matter, just whatever's first available. And the only difference is the Pfizer vaccine, you get first dose and then 21 days later, the second dose. The Moderna is first dose and 28 days later, you get the second dose. And your immunity generally starts to kick in 7 to 10 days after the second dose.
Well, that leads us to the next question. Jeff Carson would like to know, are the two injections the same formulation or are they different?
So they code for the same protein, but again, that outer coating, the formulation is different, so that can lead to differences in allergic reactions, differences in the storage and the processing. So that's how they're different. And again, they did their studies 21 days and at 28 days. So that makes a big difference as well.
I wonder if Jeff is asking the second injection of the same vaccine. So if I'm getting the Pfizer vaccine, my second injection, is it the same as the first injection I just got, or is it different?
That's a very good question. And you have to stay within vaccines. So if you get Pfizer the first one, you have to get Pfizer the second, or Moderna and Moderna. You can't mix them right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, is there any part of indoor socialization that is safe? Debbie Z would like to know.
Is there any part of indoor socialization that is safe? I'm struggling to try and find one. I'm trying. I mean, if you were indoors and separated with your mask on, potentially, I would say right now, and where we are here in San Diego County in California, right now, my answer is probably no. Right now, just right now. We can get to a point where it certainly may be, but right now, probably not at this time. But I'm trying, I'm thinking. I'll get back to you if I think of something.
I know, we're all asking the same question because we want a different answer than we keep getting. And darn it,
No.
we're so ready, but this is giving us hope, I hope, to hold on through this. Joan Ho asks, if you got tested the first time and it's negative and get tested again a few days later, it's also negative. Is it true that doesn't 100% guarantee you're not exposed or actually have COVID-19? That there are false negatives and even multiple tests might not reveal your real status?
So two things I think about in that scenario. So how far from your exposure are you getting tested? So if you got exposed and then you got tested on day 2 and day 4, yeah, I'm not confident in that. I need you to get tested at day 7, day 10, right? So depending on where you are in that exposure period. And then the second question I would have would be the type of test you have. So yes, the rapid tests for the nose have high false negative rates. You know, they're only about 70% or so. And so, but if you get a test and you send it out to a lab, those are a higher quality test. And so you can depend on those negative test results being true negatives when you send them out to a laboratory. So it depends on what type of test you're getting and how far out from your exposure. I hope that wasn't too complicated.
No, I think that's helpful because we're all trying to figure this out. And when we do get exposed, we're getting tested and we're not, I mean, we don't know. So it's really helpful to unpack as best we can. How do we know that we're really safe? And maybe that's another reason why the 14 days for the quarantine, even with those tests having been taken. So we have another question about masks from Debbie Z. How about the KN95s?
I think those, well, I can tell you the federal government is not using those.
Okay.
I can tell you that. They have decided that their quality standards did not meet the OSHA standards, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And so we have not been using those at all.
Okay. So here's a question from Joan. Is there any significant difference between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, logistics aside?
Yeah, outside of logistics, no. If they're both have the same pretty much safety profile, and one is 95% effective, 94.1% effective, no significant difference that we can see right now with the data that we have. So whichever one came available to me first, that's what I would take. It's interesting. I was talking to my wife about the vaccine studies, and Maybe you know, maybe you don't, maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't know, but I'm actually in the Moderna study right now. So I received my vaccines back in early or late August and late September. And so I'm about, 2 months out now, and I'll, late this month, I'll, go to the lab and, get more data, get more labs drawn. And so I think the vaccine we were talking about, they're going to do studies on children. Should we put our son in the study? It's like, ooh. And we both said, yeah, we think the actual vaccines are safe enough that we would actually get our son vaccinated in a trial or try to get vaccinated. We don't know what arm he'd be in. But that's how confident that we are with the safety of this and the mechanism of the actual vaccine.
Well, that says a lot, because I know a lot of us are waiting to find out when Dr. Anderson and Dr. Gwathney get their first airplane reservations to go on a vacation. We'll all get online. And I know when you guys are ready to sit in a pew in church with AJ between you, that we will see you there. So it's helpful to know you feel that strongly about the safety that Alexander could be in line for that trial. That means a lot, I think, to those of us who know the three of you especially. Here's a question from Vicky Harney. My nephew contracted COVID over a month ago and still has no taste or smell. Is there data on how long the symptoms last? And will his sense of taste or smell ever be restored?
So the data says, yes, it does come back. Now, everyone is different, and they've dubbed people who are having symptoms at the long haulers, is what they've dubbed them. And you can have symptoms for 2-3 months. Some of the symptoms that the long haulers have, I wrote them down specifically here for long-term folks. But basically, the muscle aches, the cough, the shortness of breath, that can last for a couple of months. And those are more common. The loss of taste and smell, sometimes neurologic, brain fog type things are more rare, but can happen longer term. There's no data specifically that will tell us, how long each one of those long-term symptoms may last. We're getting that information as people continue to contract the virus and have symptoms longer and longer, but it can last a couple of months is what the data is showing us right now.
Well, we have someone on the call whose brother-in-law has been testing negative for a long time and is recently had his 6-month anniversary of symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 months. That's a long time.
It's
that is a long
darn
time.
long time.
Yeah.
So, okay, I got to acknowledge there are 27 new messages in the chat, and it is almost 1 o'clock. So we may not be able to get to all of these.
I'm here.
Okay.
Here. I can stay. If you want to stay, you can stay.
Okay, and I have made colleagues co-hosts when I have to leave this conversation keep going if they can stay in their chairs. It sounds like the studies have been nearly effectively unblinded since most placebo receivers did not have a reaction. Given that information, how will we know whether there are long-term side effects, on top of which placebo receivers will want or need to be vaccinated, further nullifying the long-term data on side effects? Also, maybe we'll start with that and then ask the also next.
Okay.
One big question at a time.
So I would certainly say, well, just because you didn't have any, side effects doesn't necessarily mean you didn't get the vaccine. I had a little arm soreness with mine, but a lot of people didn't. But, a significant amount of people did have side effects from getting the vaccine. So I would definitely won't say just because you didn't have side effects, you didn't get the vaccine. Interesting question. They talked about that a lot in the about blinding and unblinding, meaning, whether you got the vaccine or not, and the ethics around once a vaccine is made available, the people that are in the placebo group that didn't get the vaccine, should you give them the vaccine? Should they get priority now because they're in this study and things along those lines? And there was a plan already by Pfizer. Their plan is at 6 months after the start of the vaccine trial, that they were going to give everybody the vaccine, right? And so that would unblind the study. And that would be the ethical thing to do, get everybody vaccinated. But then you get more data on the efficacy, meaning if it works, but you get less data on the safety, because now you have nothing to compare it to. You don't have the placebo group to compare it to. So what they talked about was what's called a blinded crossover study. But anyway, basically and not prioritizing people who were in the study. So you signed up for the study. There was no nothing in the contract that said you would get the vaccine earlier or anything along those lines. So to be fair to everyone, anyone in the study, when it was your turn, based on the 1A, 1B, 1C, when it was your turn, you would come in, and the participants, the vaccinators, if you were in the vaccine arm, they give you a shot of saline. And if you were in the saline group, they give you the actual shot. So you'd still be blinded. You wouldn't know what you got. And so you still get that, data, but then the safety still, your safety data is less, but you get around the ethics of not vaccinating people when an actual vaccine is available. I hope that wasn't too long.
But it's fascinating. I actually have been recommending my friends who are in other trials to go give blood to find out if they've got antibodies, having heard a story of someone I know.
Someone you know, I don't know, yeah.
Someone I know. So here's the next question. Given that we know neither the long-term risks of COVID nor for the vaccines, how can we effectively weigh the risk benefits, especially for those for whom COVID does not typically represent a serious risk, like young, healthy people? And especially considering vaccinated young, healthy people may still be able to transmit COVID to their more at-risk community members. How do we weigh those risks?
So I would say that we actually do know some of the short-term and long-term risks of getting the disease. So we know, obviously, the shortness of breath, the oxygen needs, the hospitalizations from short-term. And now we're finding that there definitely are long-term risks from coronavirus disease, right? So we know that. We know the short-term risk of the vaccine, headache, muscle aches, joint aches, and fatigue. We know that. We don't have any data on the long-term risks yet, but from a biologic standpoint, we wouldn't expect any long-term risks, given that this is just, again, the mRNA making a protein, making one protein in your body, making antibodies, which are similar to the antibodies that your body normally makes if you got the disease. So it's the same antibodies that your body's making. So we wouldn't expect any long-term effects from the actual vaccine. So I would compare potentially significant long-term effects, potential long-term effects from the disease, probably very minimal from the vaccine. And so getting the vaccine would, for some short-term effects, would probably be much better, more beneficial than getting the actual disease. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yes, thank you so much.
For children, yes, for children right now, yes, they are low. I won't say low spreaders. They won't get many complications, yes, but vaccinating them is going to be a key part in our herd immunity, because if we need to get 70, 80%, 85%, we have to vaccinate the children to get to that point, so they're not spreading it as well.
Thank you. Excuse me. You mentioned the mRNA process for Moderna and Pfizer is different than the AstraZeneca. Since with the mRNA, we're not being injected with the virus, does AstraZeneca infect us with the virus? And is it critical to get both shots with Moderna and Pfizer? I think we heard, yes, it is critical for the 2 shots for Moderna and Pfizer, but what about the AstraZeneca vaccine and its method? And
right. So that one is actually both AstraZeneca and I believe the Johnson & Johnson are an adenovirus, is a type of virus that actually infects monkeys, chimpanzees, and they've modified that vaccine, that virus, to produce the actual spike protein again. So you have a whole virus versus just mRNA and one protein. So you can get different antibodies to the different parts of the entire virus that is now being injected. So you could potentially have different side effects from a whole virus being injected that's been modified versus just the mRNA and one protein. that's how they would definitely be different.
Okay, thank you. Any sense that if a person is allergic to penicillin, they'll be at higher risk? No.
Yeah, no sense in that just yet. And again, most people who have reported allergies, probably the data shows us probably only 2% of people who report they have allergies to penicillin actually have allergies. It may have been a bad reaction when they were a child and their mom or dad told them, nope, you're allergic to penicillin. So it's most of the time they're not actually allergic, but there's no data right now that says penicillin is an issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, if you are an essential worker and therefore eligible for earlier vaccination, but do not need to be early, say you're not working currently, should you get the vaccine as early as you're eligible for community benefit, or should you step aside and let others go first? Great ethics question from the McClellans.
Great ethics question. I would say you should get vaccinated.
Okay.
I think we need as many people to get vaccinated as soon as possible. And you're getting vaccinated will help the community and help the public. And so if it's your turn, we're not saying anyone jump in line, jump ahead, but if it's your turn and you're in the queue, please get vaccinated. Yes.
Okay, if it's your turn, take it. All right. So, this is another great logistics question from Nancy McMahon. Will one's second injection be automatically reserved after receiving the first? I had great difficulty finding a second shingles injection within the necessary time frame after my first injection.
That is an excellent question. And actually, yes, that thought has been factored into the process. When they send my organization, however many doses, 100, 200, they have 100 or 200 reserved for the second shot already. So they won't send out vaccine until they know they have the second dose available for what they've sent out for the first. So yes, that's a great question. And they put that into the plan, into the logistics, yes.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ziegler, I think I only have part of your question. So if you want to message that in again, we can come back to it. I apologize. From Tasha, once a person receives that vaccine, does that mean that they can go about normal life, less distance, no masks, indoor activities, or is that a false reality?
In the short term, we still need to keep doing everything that we need to do, masking and distancing in the short term. Certainly, as more people get vaccinated, we could look at, okay, if everyone, who wants to come together has been vaccinated and, can show proof that they've been vaccinated, that would be something that, I as a public health official would be, supportive of. Okay, a bunch of people who have been vaccinated, they can get together and do things. And once we see how long this vaccine will be effective, then, we can make determinations on, how long that can last. But in the short term, after getting the vaccine, we all still need to wear a mask, socially distance in the near future. Because what we don't know, I don't think I mentioned this. So when you get the vaccine, we do know it prevents people from getting serious disease, serious COVID. So you'll have less symptoms. What we don't know just yet is whether it will prevent you from getting it at all. So potentially you could get your vaccine, get exposed, and maybe have a mild case, maybe even, no symptoms. Now you're thinking, oh, well, then I can still bring that home. And yes, that is a possibility, but also the lower your symptoms, we've correlated that with lower virus levels. So if you have less symptoms, you have less virus, so then less chance of actually giving it to other people. So it does translate into less transmission, but we don't know exactly will it prevent you from actually getting coronavirus just yet.
Thank you so much. I think, Mr. Ziegler, I've got your chat in pieces here. I'm going to do my best to sew this together. Too quickly, we neglect the world with whom we share the air and the water on this planet. Will our privileged class be more susceptible to future challenges? How might we help more folks with less access? So a question about how our current reality and how we're living on this planet makes us vulnerable to things like the coronavirus and what we can do about it. That's a big question.
That is. So I'm trying to figure out, so getting the vaccine to where it needs to be, meaning in the United States, or we're talking worldwide?
I
Probably.
am not seeing the rest of that. I think
Okay.
that might be a
Um,
really important philosophical conversation for us to have, an ethical conversation about how we're living
Right.
gently on the planet.
Right.
And might be a good conversation for another forum, another time. Thanks for raising that, Mr. Ziegler. Joan asked if I could tell us where to find Save the Chat so we can save the questions. That is a great question, and I am not particularly skilled at that. Does Nancy McMahon or Alan Dorsey have a quick answer to how to save the chat? No. Alan, suggestion?
Only the host can save the chat.
Okay. You know
So
what?
if any participant can hit select all and copy and paste it into a different document
Okay.
at any time.
So treat it like a Word document while it's still on your screen. Thank you, Tasha. I know I must have hit at some point always save, because I always get it popped up saved on my computer. So we'll get that too. But yes, while you're at it, just in case I mess that up, Control A, Control C, Shift Insert. You got it. Thank you. Boy, all the skills we're learning. Okay, I think we're just about there with our questions. Let's see. Make sure I'm not. Okay, just a couple more. Given the experience with 16 million US COVID cases, has the medical community developed a profile of those who are asymptomatic? For example, number of T cells or other blood chemistries? You mentioned earlier a minor association with blood type. Any sense on getting a handle on the asymptomatic component of this?
No, unfortunately, not yet. No.
Okay.
So like a profile of, if you're 20-year-old and, no problems, well, you'd probably more likely to have asymptomatic disease. Not yet. No. We have varying types of people who have asymptomatic disease, and it just depends on maybe how much of the virus you were exposed to, and then your baseline health combined to, whether you have symptoms or not.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip here, coming back to your comment, Melissa. But Pete Iverson asks, and I think we've answered this, but I want to make super sure, can a vaccinated person be a carrier of COVID if they're exposed? And I think you said yes, that's still a possibility that you might get enough of an infection to possibly infect someone else.
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly, yes. But you won't be a carrier from the vaccine.
Not from the vaccine.
Only if you're exposed, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Melissa, I think, speaks for all of us. Thank you, Dr. Gwathney, for doing this on your day off. You are a treasure, and we're so blessed to have had this time with you. I want to see lots of hands. We are so grateful, so grateful. Thank you for taking this time. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thanks for putting yourself out there and being part of this trial so you can speak to us as someone who's actually received his 2 injections. Thank you to Fran and Norm for giving us Dr. G. We're so grateful. And to Cheryl and AJ for giving us part of your downtime with them. It's really...
I will say that there's an age-old public health adage: vaccines don't save lives. Vaccinations save lives.
Okay.
You can have the best vaccine in the world, and if it doesn't get into anybody's arms, it's useless. So think about it. My whole goal here was to give information and help everyone makes an informed decision, but giving information, dispel any myths, and answer questions. So hopefully we did that today.
Well, I think so. And it also gives us some hope and a real sense of a reason to buckle down, hunker down, and get through this really difficult phase of this season we find ourselves in. So thank you. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious God, we give you thanks for this time, for Dr. Gwathney and his willingness to share this information, for all those who are here, friends of St. Peter's, near and far, friends of friends and friends of St. Peter's. We're so grateful to everyone who called in today to be part of this. Please give us the insight of when to share the information we've received so that this good news may travel far and wide and may bring health and hope to your people who so desperately need it. Amen.
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 Well, good to see you all. Thank you all for coming. Love you much and look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you to Nancy and Alan for helping out.
Thank
And
you.
have
Yes.
a blessed day.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jamal's over here now.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you,
Thank
Paige.
you,
Thank
Jamal.
you. I
Very
see you, Mom and
helpful.
Dad.
Yeah,
I see you.
thank you.
Can you hear me,
Thank you.
Jamal?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, you did great. You did great, sweetheart.
Yes, he did.
Yep.
I'm so proud. You did
Oh.
great, sweetheart.
Oh, goodness.
Yay.
As proud as we are, I can only imagine how proud you are, Mrs. Gwathney.
Oh, you don't
Yeah.
know. You don't
I can
know.
only imagine.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Love you. Be good.
Bye-bye. Love
See
you.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jamal.
Bye. Thanks
Bye,
again,
dear
Jamal.
ones.
Okay.
Love you all.
Bye.
You.
Bye.
Leave or cancel.